Hey everybody, welcome back. So moving on from ECMAScript 5 now, and we're going to push through to ECMAScript 6, also known as ECMAScript 2015. Now, the thing with ECMAScript 2015 or /6, whatever you want to call it, Node has a reasonable support for it if you're using Node version 7.5 or later. Okay, now on my machine right now, I'm currently using 7.8.0, so all the examples that I should do going forward here should work on this version, okay? So just to give you an idea of where I'm at. And if that changes, I will let you all know. So, what I'm going to cover in this video is I'm going to cover something called default parameters in ECMAScript 6. Now, you may have seen this in other programming languages where if you don't pass in a parameter, like for a second argument or something like that, it kind of defines to null or, you know, to some value that you may not expect. Now, this is very much the case in JavaScript, where you can actually call functions without parameters, even though they require parameters and things like that, right? So just to demonstrate the problem, I'm going to jump over to the code and I'm going to create a simple function here called multiply values, okay? So I'm going to do this, and it's going to have two arguments, A and a B, okay? Now, what it's going to do is going to return A times B, as you would expect. Now, this is fine most of the time because most people are smart enough to include a call to this method passing in both parameters, but what can sometimes happen is people actually don't realize that there might be a second parameter or something like that, so they call it wrong. So I'm going to show you what happens by default in ECMAScript 5 and below if you don't try and catch the situation. So I'm going to call multiply values here, and for the first run I'm going to pass in two parameters. So I'll pass in, let's say, 5 and 4. Okay, 5 and 4. So if I go over and if I run this code, default parameters part 1, default parameters part 1. Oh, I forgot the node part. You'll see I get the answer 20. Okay, so that's fine. It's working as intended. However, if I now come in and do another console.log of, let's say, multiple values, and this time I just pass 5. So I forget that there's a second argument. What's going to happen? The answer is you get not a number. And the reason why you get not a number is because when we come in here, the argument A is passed as a 5, but B is passed as undefined. And I can actually show that to you by consoling out B. Right. So if I console out B here, and I come over, and I run it, you'll see in the second circumstance, undefined was the value, right? And then not a number. So that's not good. So what people used to try and do in the past is, well, if B is not passed in, let's give it a default value. So they do something like this. They go, if B triple equals undefined. So somebody's tried to be funny here. We'll make B equal to 1. Right? And this works. So if I run it again, now you'll get 5. But it's a bit clunky because you're having to check each parameter and sniff for it, and then you're setting some initial value. Hence comes default parameters. So as of ECMAScript 6 and beyond, you can do this. You can now set the same thing on the argument. Alright, so you can set a default value for the argument if it's not passed in. So if I run this now, I've passed in B as part of the first call, so it should be 5 times 4, right, so it equals 20. And on the second call, I'm not passing it in, but I've defaulted to 1, so now it'll be 5 times 1 equals 5. So let's check that very quickly. And as you can see, it still works as intended, okay? Now, that's just for a simple number, okay? There are other things that you can basically do, such as you can default, parameters to empty objects, or you can make them empty arrays and things like that. But there's a few gotchas that might pick you out if you're not paying attention. For example, if I use an array as a default parameter, it doesn't remember the array, and each time I call it add to the same array, it'll create a new array every time. So just to show this, I'll create a function called append to array. And I'll put a num, and I'll put an array here. And if it's not passed in, I'm going to default it to an empty array. Now that means every time this is called, this is going to be a new array. And then all I'm going to do here is go array.push num and return it. Alright, so when I append to an array, I want to return the array that I'm appending to. So that's all well and good. If I now come down to call that function, so if I go console.log and we say append to array, and I pass in the number, let's say 3. Right. Oops, yep. That's all going to be fine. Alright, so I've called it, it's pushed to an array, it's going to return me an array with a 3 in it. However, what if we actually wanted to add more values? Like I now want to append a 4. You would think, okay, well I'm appending, so therefore it should be 3 and 4. But what happens is this. You get a 3 and a 4. Right? They're two separate arrays now. So that means the default parameter is always instantiated each time you invoke the function. It's not a value that is compiled into that value. It's invoked every time. So it's like newing up a new array. Now, this might have been a little confusing when you looked at the first option. You thought, oh, well, it'll be compiled to be 1 if we don't pass anything in. But the truth of the matter is, it invokes it to 1 if there's nothing in there. So it's kind of like what I wrote before, where I did the whole if check, but it's actually implicit here. It does that implicit check for me. So it's just something to pay attention to. Now, the other thing you may want to be wary of is if I do something like this. So if I go multiply values, and I go 5 again, and this time I pass in undefined, this is the same as not including it at all, right? So this now will still go 5 times 1 equals 5. Just to confirm that, you'll see the third one here is a 5. So just a couple of little tricky things to understand with default parameters. Now, you can also be somewhat clever, and you can actually set a parameter up here to a parameter that already exists in your function. So, say for example, I want to calculate the area of a rectangle. Now, a square is also a rectangle, right? So, you could create a function, something like this. You could go function, calculate area of rectangle, right? And you might want to say width. You want to know the width of the rectangle, and you want to know the height of the rectangle, right? Now, by default, the way we've got it at the moment, we'd have to specify a width and a height, in order to make sure that we're calculating a rectangle. But if it's a square, we may want to just pass in one argument. So in that case, if we're passing in the one argument, well, we want the height to be the same as the width. So you can actually do that. You can do this. You can actually specify the height to be the width if no height was specified. So now what I can do is go return width times height. Okay. So to demonstrate that, I can come down the bottom here. I can go var area of rectangle equals, we'll go calculate area of rectangle, and we'll pass in 10 and maybe 4, right? Now if I console.log this out, rectangle, and save. If I come over here now, we should get 40. Right, and we do. We get 40 here. However, what if I want to do var area of square equals calculate? And this time I just want to go 10 because I want it to be even on each side. If I now come in and I spit that out, well, as I already mentioned, we've set the width of the height to be the same as the width, so it should go 10 times 10, which is 100. Let's quickly confirm that. And there it is, it's 100. Okay, so just a couple of cool things that you can do with default parameters, and it's actually something you can't do in other languages, at least from C#. I know you can't do this. You can't set one parameter to another parameter like that, which is pretty cool. Now, the last thing I wanted to cover in regards to default parameters is you can actually use functions. You know, so you can create callbacks that can be passed in as default parameters as a default parameter to a function. So, for example, coming back up here, I want to create a function that prints a result of some sort, right? So all it's going to do is it's going to print a result from a function. So the function is going to return the result for me, and I'm just going to print it. And it's going to be, well, actually, we'll just start off with this, right? And then what we'll do is we'll just console.log print function, result function, right? And I'm going to invoke it. So, for example, if I want to create a hello world function here, so function hello world, right? And inside of here, I'll just return hello world, right? I can come down, I can pass in, we'll do a call to print result, passing in hello world, right? And this will actually print out hello world. I'll quickly just confirm that. This is just normal JavaScript, and there it is, hello world, right? However, if I now go print result and pass in nothing, well, we get a crash. And the reason why we get a crash is because we've tried to invoke a function that is undefined. So that's not good. That's not what we want. So what we can do up here is, if we don't pass it, we can make it equal to something. We can say equals hello world, right? And now this should give us the same result. Let's just double check that. And there you go. Hello world, hello world. So pretty cool. And that's all I'm going to show for this video. There's a few more things I might mention about default parameters in the next video, but I think this is a good place to start. So I'll see you all in the next video.